Hey there everyone, this is Ray Carcillo, and unlike movies, where sequels tend to never live up to the original, video game developers typically learn from their first ventures into the world with a franchise, and therefore the sequel ends up being bigger and better than the previous chapter. Still, there are always exceptions to every rule, and with that, I present to you Resistance 2 for the PS3 from Insomniac Games. Resistance 2 sees you play once again as Nathan Hale, this time 2 years after the events in England, and it seems that your efforts in the first game were all for naught, as the Chimera have invaded America. Now part of a special task force under the Special Research Projects Administration, Hale must do all he can to prevent the Chimera from putting their final plans for global domination into effect, as he'll travel all over the world taking on the worst the Chimera have to offer. There were a lot of changes made to Resistance 2 from the first game, especially in the single-player campaign. The first major down point to me is that you can only carry 2 weapons at a time. Although this really makes you consider when to drop a gun, I particularly enjoyed being able to carry 8 guns at a time in the first game, as I knew I would never run out of ammo and could be prepared for any given situation. There was nothing more frustrating than moving through a more wide open area in Resistance 2 and passing on picking up a shotgun, since any first-person shooter veteran knows a shotgun is only most effective in close or confined quarters. And then you get mauled by a cloaked enemy who, of course, is only really susceptible against the shotgun, so even though the levels are more varied and much larger compared to the first Resistance, they still feel very linear and seemed as if they were poorly planned out. Without prior knowledge of the levels, most players' natural instinct is to pass on certain items more times than not, and this is only one example of poor resource placement. The health system has also fallen in line with every other shooter out there and removed the health bar in place of an automatic regenerating system where you gain health by taking cover. Way to fall in line, Insomniac Games. The enemy AI is still top-notch, performing typical military tactics like flanking maneuvers or laying down cover fire, but several enemy types have been removed with no explanation whatsoever and replaced with new enemies that, although provide greater variety to the foes you'll face, really do not provide any more of a challenge. Speaking of variety, there are also 4 new guns to acquire in this game, but going back to my point of only being able to carry 2 at a time, you'll be hesitant to try the new ones out because you just don't know what situation you're going to find yourself coming up in. Nothing like carrying a sniper rifle into a small, tight hallway. One plus that returns from the first game is the audio-visual, with some amazingly improved graphics, a very strong original score, and good, but not great voice acting from all those involved. A more solid plus to Resistance 2 is that there are more epic battles along the way to your final confrontation. Chimera, like the 300-foot-tall Leviathan or the Kraken early on in the game, give a nice change-up to the standard shooting from cover you'll find yourself in for most of the game. Another sore point to Resistance 2 is that it removed the co-op option from the main campaign. Instead, if you wanted to work together with friends, it provided a smaller co-op campaign with different characters that helps bridge the 2-year gap between Resistance 1 and 2. This shorter and less intense experience, although it provides extra content, takes away from the co-op experience overall. At least the Versus multiplayer returned with 5 different modes of play. You still have your standard capture the flag and death matches, but now there is also a skirmish, and a new mode called Meltdown that is a more objective-based proxy battle and can have up to 60 players in a room at once depending on the mode selected, making it one of the largest Versus multiplayers available at the time. Overall, Resistance 2 tried to do things differently from the first game, but I felt the first game was fine the way it was. Insomniac Games conformed on a lot of points it didn't need to, and the plot wasn't nearly as solid as it came across a lot more convoluted than it needed to be. Add in that it raised a lot more questions than it gave answers, ruined the co-op mode, and had some really shoddy level design to it, and the feel of Resistance 2 has it come up feeling really mediocre compared to its predecessor.